Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 9, Episode 7, The Slicer. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. Happy Halloween week. And for those who celebrate, happy Diwali week. Diwali is a Hindu holiday. It's the Festival of Lights. It's celebrating the new year for the Hindu calendar. And it fell on the same day as Halloween this year. So a lot of us Indian folks were celebrating Halawali. We had a good Halloween last night. I just handed out candy. I didn't go all out with decorations on the outside of the house. Usually I put at least a few things up, but man, our neighborhood, people go all out and I just love it. It's so fun to see the creativity of our neighbors. My son went trick-or-treating. My husband took him out for a while. He just did like one big lap around the neighborhood. And my daughter, who's in high school, she had a friend over. They survived literally one house and they were like, it's too windy. And I'm like, well, also your costumes are not warm. She went as Ghostface from Scream. Her friend who was here went as Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. I'm like, how do you even know about that? She read the book. She hadn't seen the movie. But I'm like, I'm not sure that's much better. Anyway, she had fake blood all over her. Yeah, she was the female high school girl version of Patrick Bateman. But it was a fun night all around. Other than that, I enjoyed the Wiser Than Me episode this week. Julia Louis-Dreyfus interviewed Catherine O'Hara. I mean, talk about female comedy powerhouses. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I took a nice walk, a nice brisk fall walk while listening to the two of them just make me laugh. It was so interesting to hear about Catherine O'Hara's background. I've heard interviews with her before, but I mean, two ladies literally who have, Catherine O'Hara, I'm sure I probably first saw her in Beetlejuice back, the first original Beetlejuice. And then of course in Home Alone. But then of course the Chris Guest movies just launched in my life, launched her to like the top of the heap when it comes to comedic actresses, along with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I mean, I think they're both living up there together for me. They're at that comedic peak for me. It's so incredibly brilliant. So I highly recommend that episode for all of you podcast aficionados, which if you're listening to this, maybe you are an aficionado and listen to podcasts all week like I do. I'm also addicted to Crime Junkie. I was really into true crime a couple years ago during the pandemic. I watched more so like documentaries. And then I was like, I think I need to take a break. This is kind of having some effects on me I don't really like. But then I got into Crime Junkie. It's a really good podcast. I highly recommend it. I think it's like the top true crime podcast out there. So just a little peek into my podcast habits, and along with Handsome with Tig Notaro, Fortune Feimster, and Mae Martin, The Office Ladies, which actually just ended. They had their finale this week. So I listened to the entire rewatch podcast hosted by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. So I'm going to have to find a replacement for that. And then I think that's pretty much it. So if you have any podcast recommendations, please send them my way. All right, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for The Slicer is as follows. Unhappy with the thickness of his local deli sandwich meat, Kramer buys a meat slicer for himself. Elaine's neighbor goes out of town but leaves an alarm clock set for the middle of the night. George tries to keep his boss from recognizing George as the guy who threw his boombox into the ocean. Jerry dates a life-saving dermatologist. This episode was written by Greg Cavett, Andy Robin, and Darren Henry. We start out in Elaine's bed. We see Elaine wake up and she turns over and Jerry's in bed with her. They greet each other kind of with smiles and hey, little soft-spoken greetings. She tells him that this is crazy. I can't go on like this. And he's kind of heartbroken. Why? I need some space. So she flips over and George is on the other side of her. Does that mean I have to go too? And Jerry's like, yeah, I don't think she's just talking to me. And they tell each other to shut up. And Elaine's getting increasingly panicked. I hate this. And then Kramer pops out from under the sheet. You'll get used to it. It's like a rugby scrum. Elaine just starts panicking even more. I don't want this. And they're all telling her how they're going to be with her everywhere, in the bathroom, on dates, shopping. And they start chanting, Elaine, 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 over and over. She says, I can't breathe. I'm suffocating. She sits up. You're all killing me. And we see that she's awoken from a nightmare at 3:30 in the morning due to her alarm clock. But it's not her alarm clock. It's actually her neighbor's alarm clock. She bangs on the wall, turn your alarm off, and screams into her pillow. My take on this scene, I remember this cold opening being such a shock to us fans back when it aired, especially that first part when we see it's just Jerry in the bed with her at one point, for a very short amount of time. But once George and Kramer are revealed, we know, okay, this is something fake. We know it's a dream. But wow, probably one of the best cold opens of the series. I believe also they used the clip between just Jerry and Elaine looking at each other in the bed as a teaser in the commercial on the upcoming Seinfeld. I remember being like, what the heck? Are they going back to them being a couple? I was a little bit enraged, but when you see the episode, you see what's going on. I love that Elaine's story introduces the episode, a great way to show what she's going to be dealing with in this episode. And seriously, what a literal nightmare. I mean, hearing an alarm that you cannot turn off. I can't think of much worse in apartment living circumstances. And also, why is Elaine's hair totally styled for bed? I mean, she looks adorable. I like this style on her, but come on, guys. Like, it's also the same thing I have the issue with her wearing pretty much her business outfits on the weekends. I'm like, can we casual Elaine up a little bit? I mean, she's in bed. Why is her hair like styled in a barrette? All right, next we're on a job interview. George is interviewing for a job with Kruger Industrial Smoothing. Mr. Kruger asks how his experience would apply to the company. And George finesses his answer by saying how at the Yankees, he really smoothed things over, chiseling, grinding things down. Mr. Kruger is confused by his play now part of his resume. He says, for 4 days? Oh, George apologizes. That should say 14 days. Well, George, I could go either way with you. Yeah, what the hell? We need someone, right? George is so happy. You won't regret this, sir. I don't care. All right, let's find you an office. So Kruger walks out and George is following behind, but then something catches his eye. It's a photo of Kruger and his family at the beach with a younger, more hairful George in the background. All right, next we're at Monk's. George is telling Jerry and Kramer why he's in that picture, the boombox incident. He explains that he had gone to the beach summer of '89, and while he was out swimming, someone had stole all of his stuff. And he accused the family next to him, the kids in the family, in fact. And so he started yelling at the kids to give him his stuff back. And at a certain point, he just loses it and he chucks their boombox into the ocean. And then he saw his clothes floating out there. The tide had taken his stuff out, not the kids. So the father yells at George and demands he pays for the boombox. So I gave him a fake address and I got the hell out of there. And that guy's your new boss, Jerry says? Yes, until that photo jogs his memory. And Kramer clarifies that it's Kruger Industrial Smoothing. He's like, oh, yeah, they're the ones that screwed up the Statue of Liberty job. Yeah, they couldn't get the green stuff off. And George says it's a horrible company. There's no management. I could go hog wild in there. Kramer just tells him to sneak the photo out and get it retouched, like he did with that photo of Gerald Ford. Got that Ford right out of there. This is good. George is so happy with this plan. This Kruger guy is clueless. I can't wait to work for him. So George exits. Kramer tries to eat a sandwich, but he is so unhappy with the misshapen, shoddy meats. He even takes apart Jerry's sandwich to show him how terrible the meats are. Haven't had a decent sandwich in 13 years. Neither have I, Jerry says. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry enters to find Kramer slicing meat with a slicer that he bought. Our meat problems are solved, he says. And he shows off how thin the slices are. Oh, the flavor has no place to hide. Elaine enters and he hands her a slice of meat. Welcome to Flavor Country. She takes a bite, says, yeah, that's pretty good. Jerry tells her, I got a date with that doctor that you know. Oh, Dr. Siderides? Then Elaine just kind of crawls onto the couch. What's with you? She explains about the alarm, how this jackass neighbor of hers went to Paris. She's been up since 3:30 in the morning because she forgot to turn her alarm off. Kramer says, the same thing happened to his friend Lomez, so he blew his neighbor's fuse. How did he do that? Kramer tells her he'll help her once he's done finishing with this mile high of meat slices. Oh, Jerry, we'll need a case of Kaiser rolls. Jerry plays along. I think there's one in the stock room. But of course, Kramer doesn't think it's a joke. He's like, what? My take, we see Elaine's plot move forward here with Kramer's help. Once again, Kramer helps Elaine when she's in a jam. Next, we're in Elaine's hallway. Kramer and Elaine are there to blow the fuse. He also comments that her hallway smells like potatoes. They squat down next to an outlet, and Kramer explains how this is probably connected to the neighbor's apartment. So he shows her this paper clip, and he hands it to her to just stick it in the outlet. And she's like, I think I'll have you do it. And he's like, no, it's okay. You just do it, but do it quickly. She refuses again, and Kramer's like, I don't want to do it. I thought you've done this before. He says he has, but it's no picnic. Finally, Kramer agrees to do it. He moistens the paper clip in his mouth, sticks it in. We hear a buzz and the lights flicker out while Kramer convulses from the electric shock. Are you okay? Elaine asks. I'm going to lose that nail, he says. Aw. My take, this is a great scene. There are a lot of bloopers you can look up. They're really funny. I'm sure Michael Richards was very annoyed with JLD because she kept laughing. I enjoyed this back and forth between them. And seeing how scared Kramer is, it's so funny. He's like, well, I'm not going to do it. And it just has to be mentioned again. Kramer has Elaine's back all the time. And the physical comedy of Michael Richards, again, unmatched. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry is on his date with Dr. Siderides. She's telling him how much she enjoys the challenge of medicine. Tells Jerry that he would have no clue what it's like having someone's life depending on you. Well, I have this neighbor. She's like, a joke. Do you have any idea what it's like to save someone's life? Is it anything like hitting a homer in softball? Because I hit a whomper last week. Before I get into the actress here, does Jerry really like this woman? He takes her to Monk's. I don't think there's been a lot of dates at Monk's with Jerry. Anyway, back to the actress. It's Marcia Cross who plays Dr. Siderides. She's best known for Melrose Place and Desperate Housewives. In fact, Jerry references her character Kimberly when he's talking about his Melrose Place obsession. I also learned this fun trivia. She was trained at Juilliard, but as an actor, not a dermatologist like Dr. Van Nostrand, as we'll learn later on in the episode. And I think she's very good as Dr. Siderides. It's not a very funny character. The character does have a point of view, which I do appreciate. I think she plays the self-importance very well. Next, we're at the photo mat. George is at the counter, and the guy hands over the photo, airbrushed you into sand and sky. But when George looks at the photo, he notices that he's still there and Kruger's been taken out. He tells the guy, who looks confused, he says, well, I thought you wanted to be taken out, but I'm still here. The guy looks closer at the photo and then looks at George. You've lost a lot of hair. I am aware. Next, we're in Elaine's bedroom. There's a voiceover as Elaine is perusing a catalog. She's thinking about getting a $76 pizza cutter and then realizes, oh my God, I need to get a book. Then we hear a cat meowing from next door in the neighbor's apartment. Elaine looks over and realizes, the cat. There's not much to this scene. We just need to get the cat into the plot now. I do like how Elaine gets annoyed with herself, wasting her time with this catalog, contemplating buying something she'll never use. I just think it's a very relatable thing. She's a single woman with a single income. She probably has some extra money to spend. I just like that they chose this to show. This could have very easily been just a scene of her walking into the bedroom to do something mundane and then hearing the cat. But this little peek into her thoughts, it just injects some comedy and another insight into Elaine's character. She's spending too much time on catalogs, and probably because she works for a catalog. A lot to unpack there. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is slicing away in his butcher's coat that he got from buying so much meat. Elaine enters and tells Kramer about the cat and how blowing the fuse must have shut off the automatic feeder. Oh, well, that same thing happened to Lomez. What did he do about it? She asks. Well, he moved into a motel and the cat eventually died. Well, she's got to do something. Elaine says how the meowing is way worse than the alarm. Elaine asks Jerry how the doctor date went. Died on the table. The whole time she made me feel guilty about not saving lives. Elaine says, well, she's very focused. Dermatology is her life. Jerry grabs Elaine's wrist as she's trying to get some meat slices. Dermatology? Yes, she's a dermatologist. Jerry scoffs at her claims about saving lives. The whole profession is just, put some aloe on it. Kramer has this epiphany about the cat involving the slicer and tells Elaine to grab that meat. He grabs a slicer and they both exit. George asks Jerry when his next date is with the doctor. He says, well, what's the point? George urges him to do a revenge date to put that aloe pusher in her place. That sounds more like you, Jerry says. Oh, but it could be so sweet. Saving lives. She's one step above working at a Clinique counter. Yeah, Jerry says, skin doesn't need a doctor. You wash it, you dry it, move on. So Jerry agrees to this. He's going to call her and tell her off. No, George says, you got to take her out. Flowers, fancy restaurant, make it classy. As he wipes his mouth with his sweater. So you've done this before, Jerry asks. Well, almost. I couldn't get the girl to go out with me a second time. So I love that. My take on this scene, I really like it. But I have to point out, so this is, I'm stealing this from Office Ladies. I'm pulling a bullshit card. Elaine would have brought up the skin cancer part of being a dermatologist in this scene, I feel like. But I think they try and show that she's distracted at that point when Jerry's like, oh, dermatology isn't saving lives, because she's trying to bite into a piece of meat that Jerry's preventing her from doing because she has her wrist held by him. And then she leaves with Kramer right after that when he gets more into just like, oh, yeah, you don't save lives as a dermatologist. Anyway, I just feel like Elaine would have mentioned skin cancer or the skin cancer screening in this scene, but I get why they don't do it. I know I keep repeating myself, but I love that Kramer is on Elaine's team here. And that delivery of Lomez, how he moved into a motel and the cat eventually died. Poor kitty. Next, we're in Elaine's hallway. Elaine and Kramer are at the neighbor's door with a slicer. He kind of measures how thin the slice has to be. Elaine asks if it can cut that thin. Oh, he says, I've cut slices so thin I couldn't even see them. Well, then how do you know that you cut it? I guess I just assumed. Elaine tells the kitty to hold on, dinner's coming. They slip the slice under the door and we hear the cat just slurp it up. Elaine is so happy. She asks to borrow the slicer for a bit. Oh, I don't think so. You're not trained on it. Well, what do I have to know? Where does the meat go? She looks at the big slice of meat and where it is, right there. Where do you turn it on? She points to the switch right there. But where does the meat go? My take, this scene always makes me laugh at the end when Kramer is trying to stump Elaine with the slicer operations. He does have very strong feelings for it indeed. All right, next we're at a restaurant. Jerry's on his revenge date with Dr. Siderides, and she's so impressed. And he's like, well, I'm a classy guy. How's the life-saving business? It's fine, she says. Must take a really big zit to kill a man. What is with you? Jerry yells at her and says that she's nothing but a pimple popper MD. A man approaches the table and thanks Dr. Siderides for saving his life. Jerry's like, how? I had skin cancer. Skin cancer? Damn. Next, we're at Elaine's apartment. We see Elaine using the slicer to open her mail. She's on the phone with Kramer, agreeing that the slicer is absolutely amazing. And she tells him, yeah, I'll bring it by tonight. And she hangs up. She gets up and her heels are so uneven. And she looks over at the slicer and gets an idea. My take, it's a short scene, but we need to see here that Elaine is also very fond of the slicer, but in more ways than just slicing meat. Next, we're at the photo mat. George is back to get the corrected photo, but there's now a bigger problem. He's been airbrushed out, but now Kruger is a cartoon drawn on the picture. And the guy is a bit offended that George isn't happy. Hey, I had to draw that guy from memory. Considering, I think it's damn good. But it's not a photograph. I need a photograph. Then you better get a camera, the guy says. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry's looking at the photo. He looks like a Peanuts character. George says now the only way to fix it is to get another photo of Kruger. Oh, you can do that. Without his shirt on? Well, you can't do that. They have a conversation about George's career. Maybe the Coast Guard. There's a lot of pride and tradition. What do you mean for you? What about your seasickness? Well, maybe I can be a land guy. So this whole conversation mirrors what happened, I believe, in the second season when they're in the same position. George sitting on the floor, Jerry in his chair, talking about what his next move is going to be. I really like that callback. Elaine enters and asks for pliers. She gets them from Jerry's drawer, and he's like, "What are they for?" "I got my heel stuck in the slicer." "What?" "Okay, I got a little slicer happy, but don't tell Kramer. He's got very strong feelings about it." George asks about Jerry's revenge date. "Yeah, it went okay, but then I found out about the skin cancer." "Oh, so it backfired." George is glad he never actually tried it. Elaine points out the obvious. Of course she treats skin cancer. That's how I met her. She was doing a skin cancer screening at Peterman. That's what dermatologists do. "Sadly, that could have helped me," Jerry says. George gets an idea, a skin cancer screening at Kruger. So she comes in, Kruger takes his shirt off, and I can get a picture. Elaine's like, "You got a little thing for this fella?" So George tells Jerry to call Sidorides and that he must apologize because it's the mature adult thing to do. How does that affect me? Kramer enters. He sees Elaine and he asks about his slicer because I got a slice. "Oh, I forgot it," she says. So he offers to go home with her to get it. I'm not going straight home. I'm first stopping off at the circus, with all the clowns. Ooh, Kramer does not like that. He has a huge fear of clowns. He says, "Oh, you have fun with that." And Elaine exits. My take, I like the line delivery about Kramer having very strong feelings about the slicer. Elaine, so do you, but you're not using it in the right way. So here we finally have Elaine pointing out to Jerry about skin cancer and dermatologists, which I think should have happened earlier, but I know the whole episode would have been messed up. I like this micro Benestanza moment. You got a little thing for this fella? The best part of the scene is her trying to get away from Kramer. I loved the searching for an excuse so he doesn't come home with her to see that her heel is stuck in the slicer, and then landing on the circus. I love how she gets there and she's emphasizing how the clowns will be there. Bravo, Elaine. Really good plan. Next, we're at Dr. Sidorides' office. Jerry's apologizing, had no right to call you pimple popper, and he gives her a lot of praise, and she stops him. She's like, "Listen, I'll do the screening because I believe in it, but as far as you and I are concerned, it's off." Was it Pimple Popper MD? That's the one. She pats him on the face and exits. Well, Jerry's proud of himself. Still got it. Next, we're in Elaine's apartment. She's trying to pry her shoe out of the slicer, but it's not coming out. Oh, forget it. She slumps back onto her couch. Then Kramer knocks and she's startled. "Kramer?" He wants his slicer back. She says, hold on. She bangs it against the doorknob until the shoe falls off. She quickly opens the door and hands him the slicer and says she's got to go because she's on a phone call, and slams the door in his face. He notices that the blade's all dinged up. Oh, come on. He's knocking on Elaine's door and she says, "Phone call, on an important phone call." He tries the knob, but ends up pulling it off and falls backwards into the apartment across the hall, knocking the door open. The guy yells at him, "What the hell are you doing?" "Whoa, that's a lot of potatoes." We found the source of the potato smell. My take, this is a funny scene. I like how she's like, "I'm on a big phone call." And I have to call out Elaine here. I mean, Kramer is the only one that has helped you in the past. And also with this situation, you had the alarm, you had the cat. Kramer has been there multiple times. He got electrocuted for you, and yet you can't take care of his slicer. Very bad behavior. Kramer deserves better, Elaine. Very disappointed. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is talking to Jerry, who's off camera. He says how George took his blade to have it smoothed at Kruger. Jerry comes out and asks, "What is this?" He's got this rash and red bumps on his face. "Ooh, looks like an allergic reaction. Have you been wearing a fake beard?" "No." "Well, what did you do today?" And Jerry says how he went to Dr. Sidorides' office, tried to apologize, but it didn't go over very well. And Kramer says, "Well, that's where you got the hives." "Well, she did kind of touch my face." He's like, "You got to go down there and tell this doctor you're not a test tube pincushion." He's like, "Yeah, I will go down to Kruger and talk to her." Well, Kramer has to go to Kruger too to get his blade. "Oh, and I couldn't find that stock room." Nice callback. Next, we're in Elaine's apartment. Elaine has a plate of meat for the kitty, but when she tries to open her door, the knob falls off. Oh, that's fantastic. And we can hear the meowing in the background. My take, not much here. We just have to move the story along. Now Elaine is locked in her place and cannot feed the cat. Next, we're in the Kruger offices. Dr. Sidorides is there, ready to do the screenings. George says that Kruger will be down soon, and he asked me to take a photo for the record. What record? His personal file, I don't ask. Jerry enters. Jerry, what are you doing here? He shows his rash to Dr. Sidorides and accuses her of giving him hives. She is so insulted. He's not stopping. I want the antidote, pimple popper. That's it. I'm out of here. You're insane. Dr. Sidorides exits. Jerry follows behind her. You touched my face. I didn't imagine that. George is so pissed. The whole reason Dr. Sidorides was there was to get the shirtless photo of Kruger. Thanks, Jerry. Kruger walks up and mistakes Kramer as the doctor because Kramer's wearing his butcher's coat. Looks very much like a doctor's coat. And George sends Kruger into the screening room and he tells Kramer, oh, this is perfect. Now you just go in there, you check this guy for moles, and that he also needs to get a photo of him with his shirt off. Oh, you're really cooking up something. Kramer has to take a moment, get into character, and then enters the room. Next, we're in Elaine's apartment. She's in her bedroom folding her laundry while the cat is meowing incessantly. And she can't take it anymore. She turns on her radio super loud. Slow Ride is playing and Elaine starts Elaine dancing. My take, it's a cute scene. There is a blooper here where they show just how embarrassed JLD is to do this dance. And you can't hear any music, so it's just her doing the dance as if Slow Ride or whatever song is playing. And it just goes on forever. And she cuts herself. She's just like, all right, cut it. She's so sick of doing that dance. All right, next we are at Kruger. Kramer is really playing into this Dr. Van Nostrand character, doing his examination. He gets the photo that George needs and then notices a mole on Kruger's shoulder. He goes out in the hallway and tells George how he found a mole that looks very suspicious. Well, all right, just tell him you're concerned about it and to see someone else. George, why would I, a Juilliard-trained dermatologist, send him to someone else? Because you're not a dermatologist. And Kramer wants to get a slicer and take a sample of the mole. George is like, no, you can't take a slicer to my boss. No, it'll be ultra thin. He won't even feel it. No. Well, it's my medical opinion that you're making a big mistake, and it's going in my chart. Next, we're back in Elaine's apartment. Elaine's on the phone with the locksmith company, and now her radio is blasting Anna-Gata-Da-Vida. Her neighbor is pounding on her door to turn down the music. She yells and says she's getting a locksmith. Relax. Well, we hear the pained noise of the neighbor, and the power goes out. He just pulled a Lomez and blew Elaine's fuse. And my take? Well, payback's a bitch, Elaine. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. George is relieved. The photo is now fixed and back on Kruger's desk. But Jerry's rash is getting worse and he can't get a dermatologist appointment. Kramer enters with this medical book. He shows George the picture of what Kruger's mole looks like, and it is a type of cancer and we've got to come clean. George refuses. He says, I will go and tell him to see someone. You stay away. George exits. Jerry starts looking through the book to see if his rash is in there. Kramer goes into the bathroom and Jerry finds it. He starts reading. It's caused by exposure to benzene, a common ingredient in metal cleaners. Well, that's weird, Kramer says as he pours metal cleaner onto Jerry's hand towel to clean his blade. Mystery solved. It's not Dr. Sidorides. It's Dr. Van Nostrand. Kramer still thinks Dr. Sidorides had something to do with it. Oh, the poison she gave you is reacting to the bronzo. Jerry throws him out and take your bronzo with you. Also throws a rag at him. That's toxic. Next, we're in Kruger's office. He's going over his annual report where apparently they took it on the chin last year. George tells him that Dr. Van Nostrand called and says that the mole could be cancerous on his shoulder and to get it checked out. Kruger's not too worried about it, and he shows him the beach picture and says the mole looks exactly the same as it did back then 10 years ago. So, no cause for concern. Whatever, George says. And then Kruger tells the story about the day at the beach. Turns out it was he and his kids who threw George's stuff into the ocean. He describes George as this dumb-looking guy and calls him also a pear-shaped loser. Yeah? Well, that pear-shaped loser was me, and I was in that photo until I stole it and airbrushed myself out of it. Well, I'll be. You have lost a lot of hair. That's what they tell me. We have a tag to the episode, and it's in Elaine's hallway. She is trapped in her place, and all the guys are there in the hallway. Kramer is feeding her deli meats through the knob hole. Jerry can't believe Kruger didn't fire George. George is like, yeah, he said he didn't care. I can't wait to work for him. Jerry also ended up seeing another dermatologist for his rash, said it was really bad. Oh, what did he give you for it? Aloe. Reinforcing Jerry's theory. Jerry asks, where is this locksmith? And we see Elaine taking a sip from a juice box that, of course, Kramer is holding up to the knob hole. My take, even after all Elaine put Kramer through in this episode, electrocution, damaging his beloved slicer, once again, he is there for her, feeding her through the doorknob hole. And I just have to declare that Kramer is the champion of this episode for Elaine. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Hey, I'm Eric, your local clown for hire who isn't extra like most of my peers. After a couple of decades in this business, I've learned something. No matter where I go, I scare the shit out of at least 5 to 8 people, whether it be at a kid's birthday party or just grabbing a bite after the gig. So that gave me an idea for my new venture, Send In the Clowns, a service where you can hire a clown to ward off people or situations you don't want to deal with. My ex-boyfriend hates clowns, and he would always show up at my office in the hopes of getting me back. So I hired a clown from Send In the Clowns who stood right at the lobby elevators of my office, and my ex-boyfriend never bothered me again. Thanks, Send In the Clowns. Send In the Clowns will not perform any acts of violence, or conversely, any acts of playfulness like balloon animals or juggling. We simply stand there, staring into the distance. It's very effective. To hire a clown, just call me at 555-BOZOS-DEAD, and we can arrange for the right clown to send someone in the other direction of where you need peace. Send In the Clowns. The world is your circus. And we're back. All right, let's open Greg's sack lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends us a sack full of his thoughts. Greg's overall thoughts are, we have a new contender in my favorite Kramer episode ever. Kramer and his meat slicer, which connects both Elaine and George's stories in this episode, just cracks me up. Bennis Kramer is a winning combo here, and I love how easily she enlists him, as she always can, to help her with her neighbor's alarm and later cats. George gets an excellent plot as well, and I love the Kruger character. This is possibly my favorite episode of the final season because we get a lot of the four together, and the writing is fantastic. Oh, I agree. I agree, Greg. And like you pointed out as well, Kramer is always there for Elaine. And yes, Bennis Kramer, it's a good combo as well. Next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, Elaine watching Kramer getting shocked while he blows the circuit with a paperclip is one of the funniest things ever. Michael Richards is just so one of a kind in his physical comedy skills, and you can't blame JLD or any of the cast for laughing within a scene. He's never going to do it the same way twice, so it's all got to be recorded to find the best one. For sure, I mean, like I said, there's a great blooper where she cannot keep it together. I mean, and plus, once you know what's coming, once he's done it, and you know what's coming, you just start sort of pre-laughing. I mean, I love bloopers, and I know that Michael Richards was not a fan of people messing up his scenes because, and you can't blame him. He is like literally killing himself, hurting himself so severely for the comedy. And oh my gosh, we're all so lucky for that. Next, Greg says, it's a small moment, but when Elaine tells Jerry the doctor is a dermatologist, he grabs her hand while she's grabbing for turkey. I love how she tries to move her head to eat it while he's still holding her hand in place. I hadn't paid attention to this moment before, but it's so funny I had to laugh at that moment. Yeah, I know. And it's one of the things that's like running throughout the series, how Elaine, I mean, we always know that Kramer's in there eating food, but they're all in there eating food. I like that is one of the things they all do together in Jerry's place. They want to eat. Yeah, and that moment that you're talking about, Greg, I think that's why Elaine doesn't point out that she treats skin cancer in that moment. She is so focused on that dangling piece of turkey meat that she wants to take a bite of. Greg goes on to say, of course, it has to be mentioned that Elaine brings back her hideous dancing, this time to the tune of Slow Ride. Yeah, it's all those 70s hits, isn't it? All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea, except there's no idea. He says, no notes. Everything here works for me across the board. And finally in Greg's sack, his other thoughts. He says, why would Kramer not just cut a bunch of thin meat for Elaine to parcel out over the time her neighbor is gone instead of lending her the machine? Elaine can't be trusted. Well, I think he learned the lesson. I mean, yeah, he definitely should have done that. But he trusted her and she betrayed that trust. Like I said, I'm Team Kramer here with the whole slicer business. Next, Greg says, Marcia Cross has always weirded me out. I think it's more her look than anything, and especially after she starred on Desperate Housewives. She has this cold, frigid presence, and she may be lovely in real life, but man, she plays this kind of woman well. I agree. She has what my mom would say, harsh features. Very like pointy face, the eyes are so intense. So yeah, she's really perfect for Dr. Siderides' character. I never watched Desperate Housewives, so I'm not sure about her character there. But yeah, I kind of, not to typecast her, but I feel like this is her wheelhouse. Like this is what she should always play, the intimidating, cold, frigid woman. Next, Greg says, Jerry saying it must take a really big zit to kill a man is one of my favorite lines ever. Favorite Jerry lines ever. Of course, yes, it is hilarious. So funny. So one of my really dear friends growing up, she's now a dermatologist. And when my husband met her, one of the first times he met her, you know, you have to understand, we're the annoying, always Seinfeld quoting people and couple at that. So when he was talking to my friend, he called her Pimple Popper MD, and she had a great sense of humor about it. She's a Seinfeld fan. So to this day, whenever I refer to her, he's like, oh yeah, Pimple Popper, how's she doing? We're idiots. And lastly, Greg says, did you happen to notice Elaine has 2 copies of the same Ivana Trump book on her bookshelf? Harris Walls 2024. I did not notice that. Oh, I'm going to have to go back and see that. Hey, you know what? I'm going to give Elaine the benefit of the doubt here. Thank you so much, Greg, for your thoughts. We always love them. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. I love that circus moment with Kramer. I love when she scares him about the clowns because I like the way she sort of moves on him. It's like, ironically, it's like a cat. She's like kind of sauntering over to him, mentioning clowns. It's really funny. And in second, it's not really a close second. I like when she keeps yelling about her phone call. It's so stupid. All right, and my final thoughts. This is sort of a mediocre plot for Elaine. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's a simple plot, but it develops well. And plus it combines her with Kramer, which is always great. So I will say, I think it is the weakest plot because after she's locked in her apartment, I'm kind of done with it. I don't find it that interesting. I would have maybe liked Elaine and Dr. Siderides to have some interaction. I mean, they do know each other. I just don't like her locked up in her apartment. I think it's kind of boring. Honestly, my favorite part of the episode is Kruger and George. I mean, like Greg mentioned, Kruger is a fantastic character. I think he's one of my favorites. He's definitely my favorite boss of the series. I like him more than Peterman. I like him more than Mr. Pitt, more than Lipman, obviously more than Steinbrenner. Everything this guy says makes me laugh. And I love the character. He's just so like, I don't care. He doesn't give a shit about anything. So yes, very middle of the road Elaine episode. We do get to see Elaine's selfishness and the Kramer generosity, and it goes against trope, which you guys know I love. Elaine is allowed to be as selfish as these guys are, so we get that on full display with Elaine and the Slicer. All right, I think that's all I can say about the Slicer. Thank you so much for listening. Please also take a little time and rate and review the podcast. You know, we're in the final stretch of this podcast, but I would love some ratings and reviewing love online. Also, speaking of online, be sure to follow the pod on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. TikTok at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.